All right, chapter 6. What is this? Page 102. More on individuation. In a way, all these minor gods or nature spirits rely on the energy that they get from others to keep themselves powerful. Just like the politicians, their power and influence depends on the size and the strength of their constituency. Eventually, as their constituency diminishes, they fade from the scene, as did the gods of the ancient peoples. For example, the Baal, the Moloch, the Greek and Roman gods, etc. They remain just at some nominal value sufficient to hold a social security card for old age pension. Now that we have become quite proficient at analyzing and synthesizing gods, we can give a quick try and see whether we can come up with a handy god who operates the local weather. An air mass has consciousness. There is a big general pattern of winds on a global scale, such as the trade winds. The mass of air would be represented by a very large, substantial entity on the level of consciousness corresponding to the mineral level. He, in turn, will delegate responsibility for the local weather to smaller entities contained within him who know the local needs. These entities will do their best to keep everybody happy under the given conditions. A tornado is a typical high-energy individuation of a mass of air. A hurricane is another. You may remember that before we started analyzing gods in such a down-to-earth manner, we talked about particle-wave duality or individuation. A tornado or a nature spirit is a good demonstration of such individuation. This holds true throughout all levels of nature, all the way to the absolute, so that we can say that nature is modular. The very biggest entity, the universe, contains smaller entities, which contain smaller entities, which contain still smaller entities, and so on ad infinitum. The term modular means that a unit will always be divided into smaller but integral units. The communications gap. Reading this, do you get the feeling that you are standing on an island, that there is a lot of action around you, but that you are somehow blindfolded because you don't see any of the action? Well, unfortunately, that's the truth about us humans. We have seen how the mineral consciousness can extend into the reality above that of our normal waking reality or state of consciousness. The so-called astral reality, admittedly, figure 30, is a rather simplified attempt to express in two dimensions aspects of consciousness that are multidimensional. Not everything is as smooth as the diagram shows. However, it is a good preliminary device that allows us to put these complex things into some sort of order. Let us look at the level of consciousness or reality above our human waking state. It may be of interest to note that we humans do go quite often into the next level above us, the so-called astral level. In fact, we appear there during our dreaming episodes every night, especially during the REM periods of active dreaming, which occur about 5 times a night. In these periods, we are pursuing activities that are often emotionally charged. We often find that in REM dreams, we encounter people and animals, which means that they do reach into that level of consciousness as the energy exchange curve shows. They act either as props or are actively participating in our dream situations. What is typical to this level of consciousness is that our mental rational self seems to be absent here. We are quite content to put up with situations that we could not tolerate in our waking reality. Suppose that we are dreaming of a green horse talking on the telephone in a public telephone booth. In our dream, this would probably not disturb us in the least. We would not react with our reason saying, no, this could not be, but we would sense that this is a nice horse. He does not threaten us in any way, and that there is nothing wrong with the horse talking on the telephone. In short, we would react to this situation emotionally and not try to reason and figure out how he ever got that dime into the payphone. The astral realities. Note that all the lower realities we have mentioned before appear on the astral level. The astral is a vast reality that serves as a bridge connecting all physical realities, the mineral, the vegetable, the animal, and the human, with or without physical bodies. During our waking state, we don't usually function there, but there are good descriptions by people who can go into the astral reality at will and who have taught themselves to function there quite well. We have talked about the books of Castaneda in which he mentions the dreaming of himself into another self that acted independently of him. Robert A. Monroe's Journeys Out of the Body deals exclusively with so-called astral travel. Again, we see here that the functioning on the astral level is dominated by emotion. Why does nature cause us to operate in the astral plane during our sleep? We know that the arrow of evolution is pointing in the direction from the physical to the astral level. According to our diagram, we see that all matter will be moving through these levels under the pressure of evolution. What nature is doing to us during sleep is simply giving us a preview of coming events, just like in a movie theater. In this way, nature gradually acquaints us with functioning on our next level in order to prevent the shock of a sudden adjustment when we finally move there for a more extended stay, the so-called death. Figure 34a shows an enlarged portion of Figure 30 dealing with this matter. This is a very simplified diagram. It does not take into account the beings that move much faster than the average along the evolutionary path, those who engage in spiritual practices. It shows that an average person presently spans at least 3 levels of consciousness, that is, the physical, the astral, and the mental. Each coil in the helix represents many life-death cycles. As an example, let us follow the life of a person born into the lower portion of human physical reality. Lower does not mean a lower economical status, rather a person having a rather undeveloped nervous system in terms of evolution of consciousness and his ability to interact with the higher levels. In other words, a purely materialistic human. When such a person dies, he also appears on the correspondingly low level of the astral plane. This is the slum area of the astral region, the nearest in its frequency response to the physical. Therefore, the interaction between it and the physical level is easy. Such psychic phenomena as poltergeists, haunting spooks, Ouija board personalities, possessing spirits, etc. all belong in this general low-level category. This is the meaning of the cross-hatch triangle formed by the crossing of the 2 energy exchange curves in Figure 34b. Notice that a rising helix connects the human with the astral levels, Figure 34. This helix starts at the lower level of human evolution. The entity dies, lives for a while in the lower astral region, then, provided he has made enough progress, he is reborn on a slightly higher level of human existence. I am suggesting here, as you have noticed, that the dead are not quite as dead as most of us like to think they are. Many eyebrows are probably being raised at this point, because we have reached a touchy and controversial subject, that of reincarnation. It is not that until now we discussed only nice, tame subjects, but these subjects were presented as speculative issues. In other words, we discussed them on the mental level. In contrast, the issue of reincarnation has an emotional impact on many people. To those readers who need a more objective approach to reincarnation, we suggest reading a booklet called Deathbed Observations by Physicians and Nurses by Carlos Osis and books by Ian Stevenson, 20 Suggestions of Reincarnation, and Raymond A. Moody Jr., Life After Life. In the meantime, we shall continue with our rising helix. The human unit of consciousness will, we hope, be reborn next time around on a higher level at each turn of the helix. By the time he has learned all there is to learn on the physical level of evolution, he will move into the astral region and will not come back into the physical existence. That is, he will not need a physical body anymore, but will continue to live in the astral realities, which will be as real and as solid to him as our level is to us. The reason for this, naturally, is that the energy exchange with his environment is maximum in that reality. A nice thing in the astral reality is one's ability to manipulate time. Time becomes pliable and subjective. The astral realities lie in the region between our time-like universe and the space-like universe described in Chapter 4. To readers who are still having problems digesting the above statements, we suggest that they check them out for themselves by raising their level of consciousness to the point at which they will be able to function on the astral levels. This is relatively easy to do, but it does require time. There are many meditative techniques that will take them there. However, one has to be very careful not to go off unprotected into the astral plane. As we mentioned before, the boundary layer between the physical and astral is populated by creatures of the lowest type, criminals, drunks, etc. That one has no physical body and is dead does not change one's personality or intelligence. These will attack the unsuspecting tourist. Therefore, the protection of an experienced teacher is required before attempting forays into the unknown. Going unprotected would be the equivalent of entering blindfolded some tough neighborhood in a large city. One would get mugged, beaten, and robbed within the first few minutes of the experiment. The mental reality. Once the human unit of consciousness has worked out its emotional problems, evolution leads it into the mental levels of consciousness. You have probably noticed in Figure 34 that as one dies in the astral, one's helix takes him into the mental reality. There is a lot of energy exchanged between the two levels. They are not exclusive, and entities from the higher astral level may tour the mental regions. Again, this reality is solid to its inhabitants. The big difference between the physical and non-physical realities is the ability to create one's environment instantly by the power of thought or desire. This is actually happening on the physical plane as well, but it takes much longer and much more thinking and doing are required before a change in our environment can occur. A good popular description of the mental realities and our reality as seen from the mental levels are two books by Jane Roberts, Seth Speaks and Nature of... two books by Jane Roberts, Seth Speaks and Nature of Personal Reality. In these realities, the human unit has overcome its tendency to act emotionally, which is an inheritance going back to the animal level. On the mental level, the balanced mind and the search for practical and theoretical knowledge are dormant. The only emotion allowed at this level is love, the causal, intuitive reality. After hundreds, perhaps thousands of life cycles, we may find ourselves in the causal level. While before, on the mental levels, the search for knowledge was foremost, here knowledge seems to come easily. That is why this reality is called the intuitive level. Here, knowledge comes in a nonlinear way. Before, we had to learn a subject by stringing together pieces of information one at a time. Here, knowledge comes in large chunks imprinted on the mind in a fraction of a second. Sometimes it comes in a simple diagrammic form or in symbolic forms. After the imprinting, the mind analyzes the information, if needed, in the usual way, that is, if there is a need to translate this knowledge into normal human knowledge on the physical level. The inhabitants of that region do not need to translate such knowledge into a linear form as we know it and have a total understanding of the information contained in these condensed symbols. The creative process. We may now understand the creative insights of artists, scientists, and inventors who rely on these chunks of intuitive knowledge for progress in their fields. Such moments of insight are known to come after a person has saturated himself with detailed knowledge of all the possible avenues that may lead to the solution of his problem. However, all he has is a clutter of detail with no elegant and economical pattern connecting them. Then, suddenly, in a moment of relaxation when least expected, it is as if the sky has opened for a second and the solution to the problem comes. It is received as a chunk, all of it, all the details visible and fitting together in an elegant order. It may be the culmination of years of search, and it is all imprinted on the mind in the intuitive flash. The information is imprinted on the mind and then is decoded in our normal linear fashion while the person is still in a state of joyous ecstasy. What has actually happened is that in a relaxed moment when the mind was not busying itself with any problem in particular or may have been in a state of reverie, it projected itself into the intuitive or causal levels for a very short period of time, as described in Chapter 4. Here, the unit of consciousness saw the solution, since solutions to all problems are already present in the space-like universe, as will be explained in the chapter on cosmology. In other words, the solution was received when the mind momentarily happened to be in an altered state of consciousness. In that state, the subjective time had expanded so that there was enough time to search out and retain the solution. In short, the mind was resonated with the high level for a while and was able to absorb the available information. This kind of experience naturally makes the recipient very excited. He feels that he has experienced something mystical out of the ordinary, and indeed he has. The feeling that time has come to a stop is a very common experience in this case. This is nature's way of communicating with its favorite creatures, the creative people of all walks of life.